Let's do it. Hello everyone, and if you're from Estonia, then tere uued Eesti sõbrad, and welcome to Understandable English. This video is a part of an informal travel series that I have done recently, where I tell you about different trips that I have taken around the world and different places that I've seen, all in a very understandable and relaxed way. Today, we are going to talk about one, or I guess many, of my trips that I've had to Estonia. Because after my first trip, little did I know that I was going to fall in love with this country and return many times after. So this will probably be part 1 of 2, or maybe even 3. So subscribe so you don't miss any of the other ones. Also, I think that when this video comes out, it should coincide, or it should be the same day as Estonian Independence Day, the 24th of February. So happy Independence Day, Estonia. But how did I end up in Estonia the first time? Well, if you have watched the other videos I made, I talked about a trip through the Baltics after I had been an exchange student in Spain. And this was the first time I came to Estonia. It was strange because I almost skipped Estonia because I had this kind of crazy childhood dream to visit Riga, and so that was my main goal. But I'm very glad that I didn't skip Estonia because it ended up being one of my favorites of the whole trip. Now, because this trip was part of a 3-country trip through the Baltics, I didn't really have the time to dig into the details or get into the nitty-gritty of Estonia. So, as you can probably guess, the only big city that I visited was the capital, Tallinn. But as a first-time visitor of Estonia, Tallinn is definitely enough to entertain you for quite a long time. I really enjoyed my time there. The big attraction is the Old Town. And when you step foot into the Old Town, you are almost transferred back in time. It is a magical place that is very isolated from what seems like modern day. It blew me away, and it's probably one of my favorite old towns that I've seen in all of my time traveling. Because the feeling of this oldness, or the feeling of these medieval times, is still around. I enjoy that it's not perfect. It hasn't been fixed to perfection because it still gives it this chaotic and old-timey feel. So I think that the fact that it isn't perfect is what gives it its charm. I love the winding roads that bend to the left and to the right throughout the old town. It makes it a little bit confusing, even though now I have been there many times, well, it's still easy for me to get lost or to not know where I'm going, simply because it's a bit chaotic and windy, hard to find the destination that I want to go to. I also love how there's multiple levels of this old town. There's the lower Old Town and the upper Old Town. And the views from the upper Old Town are stunning. And I love how there's this juxtaposition or comparison of the old and the Old Town and the new skyscrapers that are further out into the city. I also have to give a shout out to this magical seagull who seems to live up near the tourists up in the Old Town. He is the star of all the photos that I took up there. I also have to mention, or to say, that I like that in Tallinn all of the parking blocks, or these pieces of cement that they use to block roads, are in the shape of a duck. And I thought that was very creative and interesting, and I really like that. But my most favorite part of the old town in Tallinn in the summer is the forever sunset. Because Estonia is located in the north, in the summertime, there are times when the sun almost doesn't set, doesn't go down. And so you have these beautiful yellow and orange fiery skies that hang out over the sea. And if you climb to the top of Old Town, you can wander through these windy roads and look up and see this beautiful sky. And it's there for a long time, 2 or 3 hours probably, almost all night. So if you are a night owl like me, you can wander the old town and enjoy these beautiful sights. I also love that in Tallinn, the tourist infrastructure was wonderful. There was this thing called a Tallinn card, which I ended up getting, and it gave you access to many or almost all of the museums and some different discounts, and it gave you a pass on public transport, which was wonderful. As a student, I didn't really have much money, so I was happy to get this card and then run around like a maniac trying to do everything possible that I could with this card, because I didn't want to waste any of my time or money that I had just spent. In that same sense, I also tried to save money with my hotel, and so I found the cheapest hostel and went there. And it ended up being this kind of crazy party hostel, but it was right in the center of town, so I couldn't complain too much. But as I headed out of Tallinn and towards Riga, I made a few other stops along the way. One of them was in Viljandi. I stopped there in order to see some ruins that someone had told me about, so I went there. But I met a really kind Estonian who told me all kinds of interesting things that tourists love to hear. She had mentioned that Skype was invented in Estonia. And I think most Estonians are very sick of hearing this already, but of course, sometimes foreigners are interested to hear those interesting facts that are already boring for Estonians. She also mentioned something about swings, about these big village swings, and she said that they're a big part of Estonian culture. Often in villages, people would meet at the swings. I'm not sure if that's still a thing in modern Estonia, but it's interesting all the same. But Viljandi was quite a cute little town, and I really enjoyed the ruins, even though they are like ruins. Often they're similar in many other places, but it was an interesting little thing. I also tried my first Estonian kohuke, which is a sweet dessert made of chocolate and some sort of cream cheese, which was wonderful. And I learned about the folk music festival that happens in Viljandi, and I really would like one day to return and see it. But that, more or less, is the end of my first trip. My second trip to Estonia was in the winter, or I guess the end of winter and the beginning of spring. This was in 2019, and as a joke with some of my friends, I looked at some airline tickets to Estonia for spring break, which is a very popular theme in American universities, because most people go to the south. They go to the beach to have a warm party on the beach and relax in that way. And as a joke, I said, let's go somewhere north and cold. And I noticed that the tickets were very cheap. So because they were so cheap, I convinced my friends to go to Finland and Estonia for our spring break instead of going somewhere warm onto the beach to relax. And of course, as young college or university students do, we got to enjoy the nightlife of Tallinn and explore what Tallinn has to show us in the evenings. Estonians tend to be a bit more reserved and quiet, and so in this type of atmosphere, it was a little bit easier to have them come out of their shells and express themselves. Estonians are just like anyone else, and they will be happy to interact. It's just that they sometimes seem a bit cold simply because, well, they're not big fans of small talk or about talking about things that don't really matter. So if you're talking about real things, well, they're happy to talk. If you're talking about the weather, well, not so much. I also enjoyed getting to see the rest of Tallinn that I hadn't seen on my first trip there. We visited the Teliskivi region, which is a bit more of a hipster, arty side of town. There were some interesting cafes and some different wall art and shops, and it was a different vibe to the old town. I also really enjoyed these medieval tours of the city. People dress up in costumes and get into character, and they act as if they are in the Middle Ages. And so it's a wonderful different side of the town and a different side of tourism as well. Of course, in the end of winter and at the beginning of spring, it's quite cold and still a little bit dark, but we mostly lucked out with the weather, and we even got to see a little bit of sun. But even when it's cold, you can still huddle down and stay warm at some wonderful cafes. One of my favorites was the Compressor Cafe, which sells pancakes with different fillings. My favorite was the blue cheese with mushrooms, and I still have dreams about that pancake even to this day. But you might be asking me, what about the other cities and regions in Estonia? Well, I'll save that for part 2, because part 1 is coming to an end here, and I thank you for allowing me to gush about one of my favorite countries in the entire world. I can remind you that I also had a video about the other Baltic countries, Latvia and Lithuania, so you can check those out as well. If you are Estonian, then hello, and I hope you enjoyed hearing the perspective of a foreigner about your country, and I hope to see you soon. As always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Toodles!